This time, Kilmarnock 1965, the most incredible Scottish title winners ever.
No, nay, never. No, nay, never, no more. 'Cause I'll stay a wild rover forever and more.
Hello and welcome to By Far the Greatest Team, a podcast in which football fans attempt the seemingly impossible to rank once and for all who is the greatest football team of all time. My name's Graham Dunn, making the case for Oxford United at every opportunity. And joining me as ever, our king of the data, Jamie Rooney.
Graham, good evening. We've got some finger-licking good stuff going on here today. We're going to be talking about all the events that lead up to the 24th of April, 1965, where the great KFC won a Scottish championship. And the ripples of that incredible championship that we're going to talk about went all the way down to Preston, which is another character that's going to be referenced, I'm sure, in this story, where the first ever KFC was opened in the UK, the 1st of May. 1 week later, we've got a KFC triumph in Scotland, and we've got a KFC giant beginning its journey in England and the rest of the UK.
That is a piece of unbelievable research. I didn't expect the KFC angle. Yes, this is a brilliant story, and it's wonderfully timed as well. It's going to be the 60th anniversary of this incredible tale. And right from the start of us doing this podcast, this was a story that both you and me, Jamie, had picked out as much because it stands out. It absolutely stands out as an incredible triumph and achievement in football when you look at it. And without giving too much of a spoiler here, when it comes to the crucial title-winning game, the first goal that is scored on that day is by one Davie Sneddon. And delighted that we're joined on the podcast today by David Sneddon. Hiya, David.
Hi, Graham. How are you?
Yeah, very good, very good. It's not pure coincidence. There is a connection with Davie Sneddon, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. That Davie Sneddon was my father, my hero, if you want to call it that, and sadly missed.
Absolutely. And he's an absolute legend for Kilmarnock Football Club, both as a player and later as a manager as well, and has a connection to this unbelievable season. Were you able were you able to see any of it?
Unfortunately, I was only 6 at the time, and my mum wouldn't allow me to go to Tynecastle. Unfortunately, I mean, I hear all the stories. Dad's told me lots of stories about what went on, and some of them they would not get away with it in today's football, shall we say.
Definitely so. It is interesting because we kind of pitching this story as Kilmarnock as this sort of incredible, I suppose, underdog story, because it definitely appears like that when you look back at football and you see especially what's happened in terms of how rare it is for a side outside of the old firm to win the title. But actually that's a slightly unfair representation of this Kilmarnock side, because they were quite successful, weren't they?
Well, if you look at the previous 5 seasons, 4 out of those 5 seasons, they finished second, finished runners-up. And the actual season that they won is the only season that neither of the old firm have finished in the top 4. So, I mean, there were some really good teams then. Kilmarnock won the league, Hearts were second, I think it was Dunfermline that was third, I think it was Hibs that was 4th, and Rangers and Celtic were 5th and 8th, if I remember correctly. So there were some really good teams. Dundee were obviously in the mix as well. They were a good team. So there was a lot of good teams round about. It's changed days. It's just a 2-horse race now, unfortunately. But in those days, there were some really good teams.
Since then, it has been some time. I mean, obviously, we have those Jim McLean and Alec Ferguson inspired years that we remember. But, I mean, just how unusual was it to break the old firm rivalry?
Well, Kilmarnock are the last provincial club to win the championship. Every team outside the Old Firm, Aberdeen and Dundee United, they're both cities. So it's only been a city team that's won the championship since Kilmarnock did it in 1965.
It is quite incredible. I think, and David, correct me if I got this wrong, I think the population of the town as well at the time was only around about 45,000. So it's quite staggering that such a feat can happen when it's competing with, the major clubs in Edinburgh and in Glasgow.
Well, at that time, travel wasn't so easy. Not a lot of people had cars. Buses were difficult. Trains were probably the mode of transport. I mean, I can remember going up to Muirton to see Kilmarnock play Aberdeen in the semi-final of the Cup. I thought a fantastic day it was. But we went up on the train. I went up with my uncle on the train. But in those days, Kilmarnock was a thriving town. It had lots of industry, loads of industry, and there was a lot of thriving towns round about Kilmarnock. Ayrshire was really quite a centre for engineering, for lace making. They had the coal mining. You had lots of stuff. To be honest, it's decimated now. And unfortunately, it doesn't have the same workforce that it had then. And a lot of the supporters came to watch Kilmarnock. I mean, that season, the biggest record crowd at Rugby Park was against Rangers. It was 35,995. And that's not including liftovers. I don't know if you remember when you were wee, you would get lifted over the turnstile for nothing. That didn't include liftovers, but that still is a record today that stands at Rugby Park, and that was in that season. Now, my dad always said, unfortunately, that the average crowd at Rugby Park without the Old Firm was only about 7,000 or 8,000.
Yeah, that's right. If you look at the seasonal averages through Kilmarnock's history, there's a peak in the 50s, the 1950s, where the average goes to around about 12, 13. But you're right, it kind of peaks in this season we're kind of focused on, which is 64, 65 to around about 10 and a half. But either side of that, it is 7,000, 8,000. It's been fairly consistent as well. I think even, modern day Kilmarnock gets around about 6,000, 7,000 as an average.
Yeah, there was only about 7,500 at Rugby Park last night for the Rangers game. So, sorry, you can't say that because it's going out in April.
Absolutely.
It's going to go on. Sorry, let's delete that one.
It's all good. But it's kind of to break down the kind of the Scottish League history. I break this into 3 periods, and David's already pretty much set up this strange period that I have in between. So from the 1890 through to the start of the Second World War in 1939, there's 50 titles that are contested, and it's dominated by the 2 Glasgow Giants, Rangers and Celtic. I think they take around about 86% of all titles in that period. And then from 1966, the season after Kilmarnock have won the championship, it's then 57 titles that are contested, and it's 93% that are Glasgow Rangers and Glasgow Celtic that have won those titles. So it's pretty dominated. Yeah, we've got this period in between, which is 19 titles. It's the first one, 1946, after football begins after the Second World War, right through to when Kilmarnock win the championship. The dominance of the Glasgow teams is down to 58%. Now, Rangers win 10. Celtic win 1 title in that period. Hibernian win more titles in that particular period of time, over that 19-year period. Obviously, we know that Jock Dean arrives in early 65 and changes the course of history for Celtic from 1966 onwards. But it's a really strange period, and absolutely what David's referenced in terms of you've got Hibernian and Dundee and Hearts and Dunfermline, they're all, and Aberdeen as well. Aberdeen win their first championship in this period of time. They're all competing for the top position in the league table. So it's quite refreshing. It'd be lovely to see that in Scottish football now, but it just doesn't seem, it seems a absolute world away from where we are right now. But it did seem for some short period of time, 20 years almost, where the championship was up for grabs.
Kilmarnock, a strong side. So Davie Sneddon, how does he end up at Kilmarnock?
Okay, well, Dad started his senior career at Dundee. He then got transferred down to Preston North End in 1959, and then came back up in 1961. Bobby Kennedy was playing in the midfield for Kilmarnock, and he got transferred to Man City for a fee of £45,000, which was a lot of money in those days. And Dad was bought to replace him. Kilmarnock paid £16,000 for my dad, which was a club record at the time. Now, my dad was carrying a slight injury, And he was on the treatment table on the first day, and the chairman came in, the manager came in, and the physio came in, and the doctor came in. My dad hated needles. And the doctor was going to give him an injection to try and help his muscle problem. And my dad just fainted. And the chairman went, "Oh, for goodness sake, £16,000 down the drain." So that was my dad's introduction to Kilmarnock. But he was bought, I think, to replace Bobby Kennedy.
A slightly dubious start to his career. And there you have that, the nightmare for the club chairman and manager, whether they wonder whether they've bought somebody's going to be a sick note the entire time. And Davie played centre midfield or on the wing. He was a midfielder.
He was left half. And that was in the days that you had right half, left half, centre half, right back, left back. Dad was left half, played number 10. And funnily enough, that season, Kilmarnock went 14 games before losing a game. They only lost one game at home, and I think that was against Dundee, where they lost 4-1, I think it was, 4 or 5-1. But they only lost 4 or 5 games that season. Now, Dad broke his arm against Celtic in February that year. I can remember, I mean, I was in the living room, Dad coming home and lying on the couch with his arm up with a stookie on. Walter McRae came in, he was the trainer, and said, "David, you've no move for a week." He only had a broken arm, but anyway. But Dad didn't play again until the game before the league decided.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow. So 2 months, a couple of months he's out for.
The week before.
Yeah, wow.
And then they won the league the next game.
Now, the manager of Kilmarnock at the time he is an incredible character. I don't know whether I'm pronouncing this correct. I would pronounce it as Willie Waddle, although I gather his nickname is Deedle, as in Deedle Dawdle. So I don't know if I've got my correct pronunciation.
Yeah, it was known as a Deedle. Yeah, you're right, but his name is Willie Waddle. He joined the club in 1957. He'd been a journalist. He'd finished playing football, had been a journalist with the Daily Mail, gave that up and became manager of Kilmarnock in 1957. And then he resigned, or retired, whatever you want to call it, after they won the league. Now, I'll tell you a story about what happened with my dad and the Deedle. At the time, all contracts finished on the 31st of May, and the club held your registration. Not like today where you've got Bosman and you can go wherever you like. Mm-hmm. So Dad was on 12, 10 and 8, £12 first team, £10 second team, £8 close season. So Dad went in to see the Deedle, and Deedle's sitting at his desk, puts a contract in front of my dad and said, "Same terms as last year, David." And my dad says, "Come on, boss, we've just won the league. Surely I'm worth another £1 a week." And the Deedle lifted the contract, opened his drawer, put the contract in the drawer and said, "There's the door." Although I think it was 2 words. He actually said it was off. But the problem was that the close season was about 6 weeks. And if Dad didn't sign, didn't get paid.
Yeah, that's right.
So he had no money coming in he had no choice but to sign the contract. And that's the way it was. That's the way the clubs held sway over the players in those days. Now, I know we've got agents nowadays, and for me, I mean, I'm not a fan of agents. That's me trying to be nice and being polite. Because I think they take a whole lot of money out of the football and put nothing back in. People say yes, they do. I don't know. But my dad and I disagreed on agents. He thought agents were necessary because of his time. The clubs held their older rules and they took advantage of young players. He says, and nowadays, clubs can't take advantage of players. Players hold the power. And that's the difference that we have nowadays. I mean, if my dad was playing now, he'd be a multi-millionaire. And I would be called something like Brooklyn or something like that.
It's a good name.
I can't see my mum being a wag right enough, but that's
But you're absolutely right, David. This was a period. It was coming close to the change because Jimmy Hill in the English game was pushing for getting rid of the salary cap. And I don't know if you remember a player called George Eastham. He was part of the England 1966 World Cup. He was one of the first in the English game that I know of to actually go on strike because he didn't like the idea that if he wasn't getting an increase in his contract, he was shown the door in the same way that the Deedle was, referring to where your dad could go. But yeah, it's an interesting time in terms of like clubs hold total power, but the wind of change is slowly coming in this period. But maybe your father wasn't to benefit from that change because it was a slow take up.
You're right in what you're saying, but when you look at the average wage, then football players weren't well paid.
Crazy.
Eventually, my dad ended up with 3 jobs. He was footballer because they only trained, from 10 till 12. In the afternoon, they sold cars. He's a car salesman, and at night time during the summer, he was a window cleaner with his uncle who had a window cleaning business, and that's how my mum and dad survived. I mean, we didn't have much. I'm playing the poor card.
You did it really well.
And there's a number to donate to.
But once Willie Waddle left the club, Malcolm McDonald came back. He had been the manager before, and he didn't like my dad. So my dad got sold to Wraith Rovers, unfortunately.
Quite a lot of the team seemed to break up shortly after the championship. When I looked at the actual players in the squad, I think around about 66, 67 is almost like I think your dad moved on in 1967, I think it was. But quite a lot of the players kind of were leaving around about the same time as well, David. Was that down to just a change of management or the new coach coming in and just thinking I need to change the fortunes of the club?
It was down to the manager. But remember, when Kilmarnock won the league, my dad was 29. The day they won the league was his actual birthday. Then 2 seasons after that, my dad's 31. His career's nearly finished at that.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of the players were the same, and they all kind of moved on or retired. It's just the way it was. But my dad always said, Kilmarnock, when they won the league, there was no superstars. They were a great team. They were just a great team, and they played really well. And going back to Willie Waddle, my dad said the Dido was rubbish at tactics, absolutely rubbish at tactics. But as a man manager, he was absolutely brilliant. There was a wee guy called Brian McElroy, played left wing. The amount of goals that guy scored was unbelievable for a left winger. And he wasn't one of these guys that was an extrovert. He was a quiet, wee, shy guy in the dressing room. And he always went out last, Brian. And my dad saw him, he was kind of down a bit. And the Dido went up to him, hit him in the backside and said, come on, wee man, we need a goal for you today. That's just what we need. And my dad says, you could physically see Brian, Brian's just got confidence in me. I'm going to score today. And that's the kind of man Dido was. The other thing is, Waddle used to wear a kind of fawn Ganex raincoat. And he'd come into his dressing room, hang it up, and my dad would say, if he turned to the right, everything was good. If he turned to the left, my dad was going to get it. And he said, my dad and him used to have stand-up arguments with each other in the dressing room after the game. And then Waddle would say, right, David, let's go and have a beer. That was it. It was finished. It was done. But that's the type of man he was. Man management, Willie Waddle was second to none.
Amazing. I have to say, I think I've seen that raincoat in the clips that I've seen in the final game where he is really it was close to being a David Pleat Jigger Joy moment. It really was. It looked fantastic.
Waddle actually, you read because he leaves at the end of that season, but I think he made that decision at the start of the season, I think, hadn't he? Or it wasn't a kind of, I won the league, it's time to go.
No, I think he knew he was going then. I think he knew he was going then. But eventually he got to the club that he wanted. He got to Rangers. But no, I think he knew he was going then.
Yes, because he played for Rangers as a player. I mean, he's sort of one of those frustrating people who's achieved remarkably. I know. I am a journalist, but I would rather be writing about football probably, and I have singularly failed to do that. And I am a footballer, but I have failed to reach any level of standard there. And I have done some managing, but again, not at any level. And then obviously when he's at Rangers, not only does he manage there, but I hadn't realised he goes on to the general management, and he's kind of responsible, I think, for the new Ibrox being built, isn't he?
I'm not sure, Graham. I don't really know much about his career after he left Kilmarnock, to be quite honest. But he was a big man at Rangers. And I don't mean physically. He was big in stature and he was really well thought of.
Jamie, you mentioned it, and we'll get into the title. We'll talk about everything, but we're really going to talk about two matches because it's difficult to imagine. This is a season that kind of distills into arguably the two. Well, not even arguably the two biggest games Kilmarnock have ever played, and the first of them isn't even in the title at all. It is this game in the Intercity Fairs Cup against Eintracht Frankfurt. Jamie, you can probably set this one up. Eintracht Frankfurt are a decent side at this stage, aren't they?
They certainly are. They're not far away from going to a European Cup final as well, which has a major influence on another Scottish team. I think Celtic and Jock Stein were very, very much inspired by this Eintracht Frankfurt team that's building. But yeah, so I think it's Kilmarnock's first ever season in European club football. Correct me if I've got that wrong, please, David. They draw Eintracht in the first round of the Intercity Fairs Cup, which is the precursor to the UEFA Cup, which is the precursor to the Europa League. It gets really confusing. The Intercity Fairs Cup was basically invitation, so clubs would apply and then UEFA would decide. It wasn't based on finishing where you finished in the league. It was, will UEFA accept you, yes or no? And then it was just a straight knockout through to the final. Sometimes uneven teams as well. So you get to a quarter final and you'll get clubs that would get buys at the quarter final stage, which was a bit bizarre. But yeah, Eintracht win the first game, I believe 3-0. And you're probably thinking it was a nice trip into Europe, but it's over pretty soon, especially in the return leg when, what a wonderful goal, I have to say, from the Frankfurt player, the bullet from around about 30 yards. It's fantastic at Rugby Park. And then it's 4-0 with around about 75 minutes yet to play, David. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's about right. And bearing in mind, away goals count double in those days. Yeah. So basically, Kilmarnock had to score 5 goals. The first game was on the 2nd of September, 1964, and that was round 1. The turn leg was on the 22nd of September, and Kilmarnock obviously lost the first goal, and they were thinking, that's it, it's all over now. What an incredible fight back. And they got it to 4 each. Bearing in mind, away goals count double, they're still going out. And I think it was big Frank Beattie, who was the captain, said to the referee, who was a guy called James Adair for Belfast, how long have we got left, ref? And the referee said to him, don't worry, son, you've got enough time to score another one. So, and they did. And, I mean, there was 2 pitch invasions that night. One when the 4th goal went in, and one at the end of the match, because the match just finished not long after that. But just incredible scenes that night. I mean, I know it's in black and white. I mean, it's just nostalgic just to see the game. Every time it puts shivers up the back of your neck. It's just absolutely fantastic seeing that game. But I done a wee story about my dad before the game. Waddle would name the team about 2 o'clock. They knew what the team was going to be, but Waddle would name the team at 2 o'clock. And Big Frank, who was the club captain, centre half, and my dad would disappear. And they would go to the groundsman's house, which was under the stand where he had all his stuff and his cups of tea and all that. So my dad and Big Frank used to have a cup of tea and a cigarette in the groundsman's house and then come back in to the dressing room about 20 to 3. And the manager's going, you know where we've been, boss? Aye, okay. So those days, they didn't have warm-ups. They just went straight out and played. Now, my dad hated hanging about the dressing room. He didn't even want to do that. So that's why he went for a cup of tea and a cigarette, just to get out of the dressing room, come back, get changed, get out and play. So that was his pre-match routine. Cigarette and a cup of tea.
Well, I mean, the footage is amazing. And you've got that wonderful kind of pinhole vignette, the darkened vignette, which just adds to the absolute drama. But you can feel, David, the energy of the game. Just watching that old footage, you can just feel that there's this tide happening. It's almost like inevitable what the ending was going to be. I watched it a couple of times and I absolutely loved it. It was fantastic. And you put the hairs on the back of my neck up because you could feel the energy and the close proximity of the crowd as well.
Yeah, I think the commentator adds to it. with his commentary. You could hear him getting excited about it all. It's absolutely fantastic.
And it's made better because it's rainy, it's a wet day, you can sort of feel and you're absolutely right. I mean, it's a brilliant goal to go 1 up, and that should be the end of everything.
Yeah.
Kilmarnock scored a good time, don't they? They score pretty quickly back to level it off, and they get second in the first half. So again, they're in it, but it's still, as you say, 3 goals to get is a long way. But they do keep scoring at a good time, and you're absolutely right. We shouldn't be supporting pitch invasions and so forth, but that adds. It's there are good pitch invasions, and there's so much joy with people when they're coming on.
Yeah, there's so much happiness, and I mean, I speak to a lot of the supporters at the club, and they were just young boys at the time, and every one of them, I was on the pitch. You could see me running onto the pitch. Loads of them, and they're still talking about it today. So I think the pubs were drying dry that night.
It's an incredible last because Kilmarnock get their 4th. I mean, 4 goals. That's already extraordinary. Unbelievable that you could score 4 goals and still be going out.
I know.
And they score that with about 8 minutes to go, so there's still 8 minutes, and there's the referee encouraging them to go forward, despite the referee seemingly wearing the same kit as Eintracht Frankfurt, from what I can tell.
Black and white.
And yet, even before they get that goal, they have some extraordinary. They hit the crossbar. So there's a whole series of, that is so much energy, and that final 10 minutes is properly frantic, isn't it? You can see all Eintracht are trying to do is kick it out.
Yeah, they're just trying to survive. And to be fair, Kilmarnock got lucky with a couple of deflections, which that's just the way it goes. My dad always said, are we breaking their box and are we breaking our box? That's what wins and loses you games. Yeah. But we got a couple of deflections. We got the goals. We got them at the right time. But the atmosphere was just electric. Absolutely electric. And as I say, people still talk about it to this day. It was the biggest comeback in European football at that time.
And your dad, actually, it shows a remarkable calm head at that crucial moment with the... So, I mean, the free kick, which must be in the 88th, 89th minute, that's probably the last chance. And so you're waiting for someone to shoot, because it's... you can't tell from the footage, because it looks like it has to be a penalty to me. It looks as though it's in the penalty area.
We thought it was a penalty because he was brought down. But anyway, it was just a wee toe poke to the side. And then it was a shot. And it got a deflection, but it still went in the net.
And David, you're right to call out the biggest comeback in European club history. And I think it's only been beaten in the last 8 years, when Barcelona came back from 4-1 down against PSG to win 6-1 in the second leg in total. So they won 6-5. But it does get overlooked. So when you just do your classic kind of internet research for the best comebacks or biggest comebacks in European football, it's really hard to find this result. And it just feels right to be profiling it right now, because I think when Barcelona did that comeback, it's like, oh, this is, the best comeback since, I think it would quote in the Deportivo one versus Milan in the early 2000s, which was 4-1, 4-0. This one we're talking about right now with Kilmarnock, you're 4-0 down and you win 5-4. It really is up there as one of the best European comebacks of all time.
Yeah, it's not talked about often enough, to be quite honest.
I agree. Totally agree.
You're right in what they say about Barcelona being the best comeback since Deportivo or whoever it was. They conveniently forget the Scottish clubs were quite prolific in the 60s. There was a lot of good, clubs in the 60s played in Europe. Obviously, the next season, Kilmarnock played in the European Cup against Real Madrid, who went on to win it, eventually beat Man United. Sorry to tell you that, Jamie. And I mean, and that, just as a wee aside, Kilmarnock drew 2 each with Real Madrid at Rugby Park. Yeah. Went to the Bernabeu, scored first, missed a penalty, and then got beat 5-1.
Yeah. But, David, you are right. And about Scottish teams being unfairly overlooked, because we did on this podcast, we did Real Madrid from the 1950s, the team that won the very first 5 European Cups. In the very first edition, in 55, 56, Hibernian get to the semi-finals of the European Cup. Now, that's never really spoken about I don't hear, I mean, Graham and I absorb ourselves in a lot of football history, but it's really hard to find that nugget of information. Hibernian, the Edinburgh team, get into the semi-finals of the very first European Cup is something to be called out and celebrated. But I think it's right. I think it does seem to be that Scottish clubs are overlooked, and they've got some incredible, unless it's Celtic 67, obviously, it does seem to be that they get overlooked in the wider context of European glory.
Excellent. So, Kilmarnock have their first of these two unbelievable games which go on to define this season, and we will look at the title campaign and their absolutely crucial victory against Hearts in the second half.
Hi, Graham here. We're just about wrapping up our plans for this current season, but we're already turning our attentions to our next season. If you've been listening, there are some teams you would like us to cover, or would even like to come on and talk about those teams, you can contact us, drop us a line. How do they get hold of us, Jamie?
Well, they can get hold of us by using the social media accounts, X or Blue Sky, where we have the same handles. We've got yourself at Said and Dunn, and myself, Couch Pandito. So Couch Pandito at Blue Sky, and Said and Dunn at Blue Sky, or on the X, aka Twitter equivalent.
And you can also get hold of us on Insta, which I think the kids call it these days. What's our handle on that one?
Yes, we're on Instagram, where we're trying to share some of our little videos. So please give us a like, a follow, and keep in touch with our little videos. So we are on Instagram as the Greatest Team Football Podcast, or by far the Greatest Team Football Podcast. Search for either of those and you'll find us. Please follow.
Excellent. So welcome back. We are talking about the incredible Kilmarnock 1964-65 season, 60th anniversary as we speak. And it's difficult for me to manage to crowbar an Oxford United reference into this. I don't think I haven't managed to find one. The best I can do is talk about Stuart Finley, who we currently have on loan at Kilmarnock, who I don't think is even playing at the moment.
He's injured. He got a really bad injury.
Oh, no.
Another month before he comes back.
He's done quite well there, hasn't he?
Oh, he's a fantastic player. Fantastic player for Kilmarnock. And we've badly missed him. Really badly missed him. And we've also missed our captain, Kyle Vassell. He got a bad injury as well. So that's front and back. Two stalwarts of the team haven't played for 3 months now. So.
Difficult times. So, yes, we are talking about the 1964-65 league season. As we've set up, Kilmarnock, they are a strong side at this stage. They would go into the season expecting to be challenging near the top. But it is a very unusual season without Celtic or Rangers. Oh, but Celtic and Rangers aren't miles away. From what I can tell across the start of that season is almost anyone. They were. It was really, really open.
Yeah, it was. I mean, as we said earlier on there, you had Hibs, Hearts, Dundee, Aberdeen, Dunfermline all challenging for the title, and it's unbelievable that it came down at the last day for somebody to win the league. Doesn't happen very often, but it did then, and it was fantastic that the actual league went that far. Kilmarnock had to win by 2 clear goals. Now, it could have gone 2-0, 3-1, 4-2, 5-3. John Livingston, who's the club historian, what that man doesn't know is not worth knowing about Kilmarnock Football Club. He's an unbelievable. I mean, the scrapbooks he's got, the stuff he's got is fantastic. And he calculated up to 7-5. He didn't go any further than that, but up to 7-5, Kilmarnock would still have won the league. So there you go. 0.042 of a goal or something like that.
Yeah. It's it is literally one of the tightest winning margins in the history of the game. I've only found 2 that are smaller than that, in fairness, across all leagues.
It was not long after that, I can't remember when it was, but Hearts were challenging for the title again.
Yeah.
And they changed it from goal average to goal difference. and it was going right down to the wire, and Hearts were winning the league until the last 2 minutes, until a certain Albert Kidd scored for Dundee, and Hearts lost the championship on goal difference.
They did.
15 goal average, they probably would have won. 15 goal difference in 65, they would have won. So they get blutered twice.
Yeah, 2 championships that never were for Hearts. And Hearts were actually one of the instigators to bring the rule change in. So goal average or goal ratio, as it's been called, it was used in the English League from the very beginning in the 1880s. Scotland didn't adopt it until 1920-21 season. And then by 1970, FIFA had put in goal difference. And slowly but surely that would change. And Scotland were one of the first adopters, and they adopted the goal difference scenario in 1971-72 season. And I think it's on the back of the fact of what happened in 64-65. And you're absolutely right. I mean, if it was in goal difference, I think Hearts could have lost 8, 9, 10-0. I don't know what the calculations would have been. And they still would have been champions by virtue of goal difference. And just for clarity for any of our listeners, average goal ratio is goals scored divided by goals against, and the higher net score will be placed higher in the league table. Goal difference is quite simply goals scored minus goals against. The greater will get the higher placing in the table. And you're right, David, there's very few occurrences, and I think that's down to the fact that the odds of it happening is so super high, where goal difference and goal ratio has decided a league table. Normally league tables are decided on points, and very rarely are they decided on anything other than that, but it does happen. And what's even more incredible in this story, the 2 teams that are going for the championship are in the final game as well. And I can only think of only one other occurrence where that's happened in the history of the game. And that's the 88-89 season in England when Liverpool and Arsenal play each other and it goes down to goals scored, which is incredible. But yeah, I mean, Hearts get off to a flyer as well, though, don't they? I think Hearts are 16 games unbeaten against Kilmarnock's 14 games unbeaten. And I think it's Kilmarnock who are the first team to actually beat Hearts at Rugby Park 3-1.
Yeah, look at my stats here. Just to see, I mean, John Livingston, he gave me every single game my dad's played.
That's fantastic. Oh my gosh, look at that. That's a wonderful printout you got there in front of you.
We played them in the League Cup. We didn't. We beat them 1-0 in the League Cup that season.
I think the league game was in December.
19th of December, we beat them 3-1.
Yeah.
My dad scored, and so did Brian McElroy.
Amazing.
2 scorers, yeah.
So, David, out of interest, do you have in that wonderful piece of data you have there, do you have the minutes the goals were scored in during the game as well? No, because I couldn't find that anywhere. So I was curious to know whether there'd been any odd late goals scored, that didn't feel...
In that season.
Yeah, that didn't feel like they had any real meaning. But obviously when it comes down to the final league table... that fourth goal that was scored in the 91st minute that was just, another goal to secure the win. Didn't feel like much. Obviously, in the grander scheme of things, that would have been amazing.
Well, there probably was, to be honest, because my dad always said that Kilmarnock were the fittest team in the league. They had a trainer called Walter McRae who was based at a sergeant major, and the fitness of Kilmarnock was they would still be going 91 minutes while other teams were done in 70 or 80 minutes, and Kilmarnock were still going. That was what won them the league. I don't know what the stats are for late goals. John will be able to tell us that if I went and asked him. But I would imagine there'd be quite a few late goals because of the strength of the fitness that Kilmarnock had at that time. Another aside, and I bet you don't know this, FIFA occasionally asks associations to do experimental games. So 2 months after Kilmarnock beat Hearts, they asked Kilmarnock and Hearts to play a game where the first half had no offside and the second half had offside.
Wow.
The score at half-time, 2-0 to Hearts, no offside. You know what the score was at full-time with offside?
No.
8-2 to Hearts. And Sneddon scored the 2 goals. But
wow, that's fascinating.
Because Kilmarnock had finished their season and they were in the training.
Yeah, okay.
Whereas Hearts had been on a tour of Scandinavia.
That's right. They played all the way through because they played this thing called the Summer Cup as well, which I think may have been just for teams in the Edinburgh area. I may be wrong. And then they went straight to Scandinavia on the tours. Yeah, so Hearts play all the way through. There's no real break for them at all. A couple of weeks in August, and that was it. And then they got this experimental game that they're playing as well. It's incredible.
Yeah. But I mean, imagine no offside and it's only 2-0, and then they bring offside and it ends up another 8 goals scored. How does that work?
It does feel like if those halves had been played the other way around, that we may not have offside today.
Exactly. I remember in Scotland they had an interesting experiment with the Dryborough Cup. I don't know if you ever heard of the Dryborough Cup in Scotland.
No.
Where you were only offside from 18 yards to the goal line.
Yeah. So it's kind of like where I think the US adopted this, or maybe with their 35-yard line, because when they brought the 35-yard line, it was used for penalty shootouts, well, not penalty shootouts, like shootouts, but also you were only offside if you were in that last 35 yards of the pitch and not from the halfway line to the 35-yard line.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, I'm sure it was 18-yard line, basically the penalty box. Yeah. You could only be offside beyond there. Didn't last, though.
There was I thinking it was only the British government who tested things in Scotland first, like poll tax. But actually, it turns out that FIFA have been doing it for years.
Yeah, they've been doing it for years before that. There's another side. Remember the Texaco Cup?
Yes. Yeah, fantastic.
Kilmarnock were playing Wolves, right, at night, and the floodlights failed. And I can always remember Ian Fleming, who was a centre forward for Kilmarnock, was an electrician. And I can remember him coming in. He opened the cupboard where all the light electricity was, and Ian standing in his kit, football boots, the whole works, with a screwdriver trying to fix the lights. He got them working.
That's why having those multiple jobs came in handy.
He did.
Kilmarnock also played in a football tournament in the early 1960s, an international football tournament. And we touched on it when we did the Dukla Prague episode, Graham. It was the International Americas Cup. And they actually got to the final in the first edition in 1960, and they lost to the Brazilian team. I think they're called Bangnu. Bangnu. Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, Kilmarnock were already branching out and playing in international tournaments. I think they played about 3 or 4 editions in the US each summer.
It's the New York International Tournament, I think it was called. And Dad played in a couple of them, but he said that the humidity was unbelievable. He said before you even went out, your strip was soaking in sweat. I said it was quite harsh to play in. But they had a great time over there. They didn't stay in a hotel, they stayed in apartments. And my dad was chief cook and bottle washer, so he got to choose what they got to eat because nobody else could cook.
Fantastic.
This season does set itself up. Kilmarnock, fundamentally, they seem to be very strong defensively in this year. That seems to be at the heart of their success. And maybe that ties into what you've referenced a couple of times, that people have said that this was a side not full of stars. It was a really hard-working side.
It was a really hard-working side. The 2 centre-halves and 2 guys called Frank Beattie and one called Jackie McGrory. Now, when Big Frank signed for Kilmarnock, he was a miner in Plean in Stirlingshire, and he would do a shift down the pit, get a train and a bus to Kilmarnock, do his training, get a train and a bus back home, a couple of hours kip, then back down the pit. That was your centre-half and your captain. An amazing man, an absolutely amazing man. But they were hard as nails as well. But you had Andy King. I mean, I've never seen a right back with thighs bigger than my 2 legs put together. And he was strong as an ox, Andy King, and nobody got past him. And then you had the left back, Mark Watson. He would run through a big door for you. I mean, he was unbelievable. And that was a back 4, and very, very few people got past them. Or they ended up with a broken leg.
Your father, David, he does the foreword in the Rob Hadgraf, I think it is, the book about this football season. I'm sure you're aware of that. In that foreword, he talks about, he uses a word that I don't really know what it is, so hopefully you could bring that to life for me. But he does say that the team were hard with each other on the pitch, as if to say, they were kind of open about how they felt and what their feelings were and how they were driving. But socially off, they got on really well. And he used a word called crabbit. Is that pronounced right? I have no idea what that means. My apologies.
How can I put this? It means that if you're not happy with somebody, you'll tell them to their face you're not happy.
Okay.
Quite forcibly. And you're right. I mean, socially, the team, we all used to go on holiday together. You'll know big Alan McInally.
Yes.
Right. Well, he was Jackie McInally was the inside right for Kilmarnock, and that was Jackie's son. And I've actually got 8mm film of Alan McInally, 6-year-old, running around a sandcastle at Portobello Beach. I've threatened to send it to Sky, but Mum will not let me. But as you said, going back to what you were talking about, Jamie, they were very open with each other. They were great friends off the pitch. And they weren't afraid to tell each other where they'd gone wrong. But they knew they were getting told the truth and they could do something about it. And it engendered a team spirit within that team that I don't think any other team had at the time.
I think that also plays into Willie Waddell kind of the Frankfurt game and the experience of coming back from that, this never kind of beaten feel. And there is a point, sort of, I think, February time where Kilmarnock are just dipping fractionally. I think they dropped down to 4th, and there's a brief moment where maybe you could be forgiven for thinking, oh, it's going to happen again, especially for a club that, and we touched upon, you mentioned right at the start, this is a club that has been at the top of the Scottish game, but keeps coming second.
Yeah.
This is kind of...
Always a bridesmaid, never the bride. That
must have been, I guess, in the back of maybe the Kilmarnock players or the Kilmarnock supporters' minds that, oh my God, it's going to happen again. We're going to get that close. But I do wonder if that turnaround at Frankfurt, really achieving something that appears impossible, has a really important psychological effect.
It probably did. You're probably right, Graham. But bearing in mind, they'd gone 14 games undefeated. They got beat from Dundee in February, and then they got beat away at Celtic. So, there was a bit of, no, not again. But to be fair to that team, as I said earlier on, they were a strong-minded team. And I just think they knew they were going to win that league as far as I'm concerned, and they were going to do it. And going to Tynecastle on the 24th of April 1965, it wasn't just my dad and Brian McElroy that won that game. Because I don't know if you've seen the save from Bobby Ferguson at the end.
Yep.
That was an unbelievable save. Now, he only played about 6 games in that year, Bobby Ferguson, Campbell Forsyth was a goalkeeper, but I think he got injured playing for Scotland. I might be wrong in saying that. But it was a full team effort to win that league. And they were one of the strongest teams, if not the strongest team in that league at that time. And it was in the stars that they were going to win. They deserved it 4 times out the previous 5 seasons.
Yeah, I totally agree. The tenacity is there. They deserve this title because of the closeness of the previous 4 and 5 seasons. Yeah. The Bobby Ferguson save is brilliant. It's kind of almost Gordon Banks-esque before Gordon Banks did his 1970 save with Pele. It is an incredible save. And what I loved about the footage that you see is the Kilmarnock players immediately turn to Bobby Ferguson and almost celebrate it like a goal, the importance and significance of that save. And also what I read, and hopefully you can confirm this, David, is that I think it probably just really profiles what a great character I hope you forgive me for saying this, what a great character your father was, because I read that Alan Gordon, who missed that chance that Ferguson saved, took a bit of stick, and your dad had Gordon's back. I've read that, he kind of played it down where people were trying to get on Alan Gordon's back with that save. He had, he was there to kind of champion as a great player, and it was just a brilliant save and, give Gordon a break.
If I remember correctly, he kind of mishit it. He kind of hit it into the ground. But there was a lot of respect for each other in those days. There was only one player that my dad didn't get on with, and that was a guy called Pat Quinn. I think he played for Hibs. There was a kind of handbags at dawn type thing, and they both get sent off. which I find difficult because my dad never fell out with anybody, really. Although there is a couple others, but that's another story. But there was a great respect in those days.
As you said, the script is definitely written. I mean, I love how the narrative sets up that Kilmarnock have to play Hearts and that Kilmarnock have to go to Tynecastle. So that must be a sort of a really significant advantage for Hearts.
Absolutely.
And I guess the best way to put the crowd on edge is to score relatively early. And this was your dad ever asked about this goal? Has he ever had to talk about it over the years?
Well, I think he was asked by the manager, "What the hell were you doing in the 6-yard box?" And it was probably the only goal he scored with his head at the time. But it was a fantastic cross by Tommy McLean. He could put a ball in a sixpence, and he was an unbelievable player as well. That was Jim McLean's brother, the Jim McLean that was manager of Dundee.
Ah, okay, yeah.
United, yeah. And there was another brother called Willie McLean who played as well. But Tommy, I think he might have been the youngest player for Kilmarnock in that Eintracht Frankfurt game. I think he was only 16 or 17 at that time. I think that might have been his European debut, or it might have been his actual debut. I'm not 100% sure. But Tommy was a fantastic player, and the crossover to my dad, there was nobody near him. Nobody near him. And just put it in the back of the net. And I think that was in about 22 minutes or something to score. And then Brian McElroy scored what proved to be the winning goal, the league winning goal, not long after that. And then it was just all hands to the pumps. Let's not lose a goal. And it came down to Bobby Ferguson saving that goal, or saving that shot from Alan Gordon in that last minute. So it was great. But there were actually, if you look at, you don't really see it on the television, but there's actual people hanging from the floodlight pylons round the ground. It was mobbed, and there was no segregation in those days.
No.
It was absolutely mobbed.
Yeah.
That's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when they come back to Rugby Park, they weren't expecting anything come on up because you didn't know they were going to win the league. I mean, there was no expectations coming back to Kilmarnock. And the team bus came through Kilmarnock. I mean, Mum and Dad lived 500 yards away from the ground in a flat in Barbados Road. And my dad said, Boss, let me off. I'll go and get Rena, my mum, who was 7 months pregnant with my sister at the time, and I'll get you over at the park. So my dad got off the bus, ran up the stairs. Mum's not there. And there was a party going on in my mum and dad's house, and my mum and dad weren't there. All my relatives. And my dad says, Where's Rena? So I said, "We're over at Rugby Park." So Dad hops it over to Rugby Park, and the crowds are thousands there. And the gates were shut. And my dad fought his way to the front of the gate, and there's a big sergeant sitting there. "Sorry, son, nobody's getting in. And my dad looked up and he says, "Do you know who I am? You don't recognise me. I was playing the day." And the sergeant looked down at him and says, "Oh, it's you, son. You, Davie. In you come. So he nearly never got back into Rugby Park to celebrate.
Wow.
Just fantastic scenes. An incredible triumph. Go on, show me.
Well, I just kind of go back to a couple of things on the game and the goal. The cross that you talked about, David, from Tommy McLean.
Tommy McLean.
It's inside the penalty box as well. Which is, you don't see that often because we're so accustomed to shots being fired inside the penalty box or passes. The fact that he's chipped it over the kind of the lone centre back and picked out your dad at the back post is fantastic. There is a third game, Graham, I think that's probably worth just profiling.
Yeah, go on.
But it's not Kilmarnock, because we talked about the home records. Hearts actually lose a home game in February to Dundee 7-1, which is incredibly out of character for that season. When you look at their results, it doesn't fit. It's almost like everyone's been ill that day. I don't know the circumstances of the game, so I couldn't get enough detail. But we talked about goals from Kilmarnock in the last minute that would have had significance. Those 7 Dundee goals has an absolute massive impact on this title race, because it is what allows this title race to go to the final game where if Kilmarnock can win by the 2-goal margin, they are champions. Any other day, Hearts, with Dundee, their home record is pretty consistent. Even if they lose it 3-1 or 4-1, it really does change the shape of that final game. So again, it's like one of these crazy what-if scenarios, but Dundee having a great day in Edinburgh and that late February afternoon really did contribute to set up this incredible climax. And it is one of the best Football League climaxes in the history of the game.
It's amazing how football turns out. How many coincidences you have. What if, what didn't, what about that? If he had scored, if he hadn't been sent off. It's just, over the season, it's just unbelievable how it all pans out.
Yeah.
As you've mentioned there, David, David goes off to join Wraith Rovers towards the end of his career, but this isn't the end of his relationship with Kilmarnock, because he returns as manager, doesn't he?
My dad came back to Kilmarnock initially as coach, and then he got made assistant manager, and then eventually he got the manager's job. My dad was at Rugby Park for over 40 years, on and off. So, I mean, it's some record of being with the one club.
Yeah, that's incredible.
It's an incredible period, and as manager, he has success in I think it's the Tennent's Cup, it's called at that stage, which is the
Tennent Caledonian Trophy. It was a 14 tournament, Brighton, Rangers, West Ham and Kilmarnock. And on the Friday night there was 2 games, and on the Sunday there was the final, or the semi-final and the final. We beat Brighton on penalties. We drew 1 each on the Friday night and beat them in penalties. And Rangers had beat West Ham 3-2. Bearing in mind, Rangers had the Driver Cup final against Celtic on the Saturday, where they basically played 3 games in the 3 days. But on the Sunday, it was a final between Rangers and Kilmarnock. And Rangers were up 2-0 with 2 minutes to go. And Bobby Street scored for Kilmarnock. So it's 2-1, a minute to go. And Kilmarnock got a penalty, which George Maxwell converted, as he always did. So it's 2 each, goes to extra time, and then it goes to penalties, which Kilmarnock won on penalties. Now, the Rangers team just walked off. They were absolutely gutted. And they had to get Derek Johnson back out to pick up the salver or what it was they were getting. And then Kilmarnock got the Tennent Caledonian, a lovely trophy, which Rangers kept, by the way. They didn't give it out, and it's never been played for since. Rangers kept the trophy, we got a replica. But I can always remember being in the dressing room at Ibrox after the game, and all these players drinking cans of Tennent's lager, courtesy of the sponsors. Yeah. And I'm thinking, why are footballers drinking beer? Can you imagine that today? It ain't going to happen, is it? Not in the dressing room. So, that was a great day for my dad, winning the Tennent Caledonian Trophy. My dad actually won 4 trophies with Kilmarnock, so he did not bad.
So for Kilmarnock, that season was the high point, I guess. It's difficult to, how you ever follow a season like that, and it's been ups and downs. I guess, David, you had very little choice but to follow Kilmarnock as a result.
I've been a Kilmarnock fan since 1961, and I'll never change. And I've got lots of memories, lots of highs, lots of lows. And when you support a club like Kilmarnock, you appreciate the highs because there are lots of lows. See, if you're a glory hunter supporting the likes of Rangers, Celtic, and you're winning all the time, you're winning all these trophies, maybe Rangers not so much at the moment, it becomes boring. You don't appreciate that you've won a trophy. When Kilmarnock won the Scottish Cup in 1997, I've never seen scenes in John Finney Street, which is a big main street in Kilmarnock. It was absolutely mobbed with thousands and thousands of Killie fans. The bus could hardly get up the street. And you remember that. That is a day that I'll never forget. And that's one of the highs, because you only appreciate how high it is when you've experienced all the lows. And that's what being a supporter of a provincial club, if you want to call it that, is what it's all about for me. And I think the fans appreciate it more now
Mm.
because we've done nothing in the league since then. And when my dad was alive, I mean, there was youngsters used to come up and want their picture taken with him and
Fantastic.
his autograph. They'd never seen him play. They'd never even seen him as manager. But there was that aura, there was that legendary status that all these players in that league championship team had. They were all legends, absolutely every one of them, all legends, including the three that didn't play. They were the travelling subs. And as an aside, Jim McFadden, he actually won the league with Hearts as well.
Oh, wow, really?
So he won the
Fantastic.
league and won it with Hearts.
Oh, that's
Fantastic.
quite impressive. There can't be many players who've won the Scottish title twice
And
without.
not played for Rangers or Celtic.
Yeah. That's a really good question, Graham.
I know what your homework is tonight, Jamie. We'll be following that one up. That's a tremendous fact. I love that.
That is, yes.
Excellent. Okay, well, we should get to ranking this team. As a reminder, we have 5 categories of greatness, from all-time greats at the top to true greats. Then our middle category, touch greatness, edge of greatness, and then blinkered greats at the bottom. And I always like to put Jamie in the hot seat first, which is always harsh for me. Jamie, how would you rank this Kilmarnock side?
I was desperately hoping you weren't going to put me in the hot seat first. In the context of how we rank teams. So I'm going to start without talking about how we rank teams normally. Without shadow of doubt, for Kilmarnock and probably in Scotland, these are going to be top bracket team. It's all-time greats for Kilmarnock. There are true greats in Scotland as well in terms of what they've achieved because of the size of Kilmarnock in terms of the population. And it is, as David mentioned, they're a provincial town, the last team to win it in a football league that has been dominated by 2 teams. But what we've got is some real nuggets in this. We've got probably the tightest league challenge in the history of the game. I can only find one, and that was, well, I found 2, but one's cheeky. The real one is in Yugoslavia in 1951. It came down to 0.013 goal ratio between Red Star Belgrade and Dynamo Zagreb. David already mentioned the 85-86 season when Hearts lost on goal difference. Had goal ratio been in play, as David mentioned, Hearts would have won it, and that was by 0.24. So it's a bit cheeky because that's not a real one, but that's how close it was for Hearts. This one was 0.04. There's nothing like it. I mean, you can talk about your 89 Liverpool Arsenal, and that was thrilling, that was dramatic, but in terms of tightness, this is way tighter. And then you've got one of the greatest comebacks in European football history that does deserve to be profiled. Hard-working bunch of players, as we've learned from David's insight, that got on well off the pitch as well, socially, a real family unit, and you can feel that. So I'm rambling on because I'm scared, and I'm scared because what I'm going to do, I'm going to kick us off, and I'm open to changing on this. I'm going to put them in our third bracket as a touch of greatness.
Touch, that's harsh. David, you're going to push them up.
I've lost a friend already.
Bearing in mind, it's the tightest league decider ever. Mm-hmm. They had been runners-up, the bridesmaid, 4 times out of the previous 5. They had a great team who played against one of the biggest teams in Europe. Now, bearing in mind, Eintracht Frankfurt played against Real Madrid in that famous European Cup final. I think it was 5-3 at Hampden Park, one of the greatest European Cup finals. So Eintracht Frankfurt were no mugs.
No.
So I'm going to go hand in heart, kiss the strip. Number 1 for me.
I love it. That is fantastic. Graham.
I love it. And
I do love that.
You rightly should. I think.
Yes.
I'm a fan of narrative, and I think the narrative on this story is unbelievable. I think that definitely works. I'd almost be inclined with you on the touch of greatness, but I think what lifts it up is that this isn't just a one-off. It's easy to picture this story as a one-off because there's one kind of title, But actually, because it's a consistent period. We talk about legacy and this is the end of a journey, isn't it? This is Kilmarnock. as David knows to his pain and cost. There aren't usually 5-6 years of consistent, solid achievement. This is a fantastic run. The second place finishes topped off. This is the culmination of an amazing story. So I'm going to split the difference between the two of you, and I'm going to put them in our second category. And I'm going to say Kilmarnock, 1965, true great.
I'm very comfortable with that. I'm not sure David's comfortable.
David has left the chat.
Bear in mind, 4 times out of the previous 5 seasons, they were runners-up. With a little break in their box and a little break in our box, that could have been another 5 league titles.
Yeah.
So they were a really, really, really good team. So to put them second, I'm sorry. No, I just cannot believe Oxford United can give 2.
No, we haven't even talked about the number of cup finals this team made as well, and also won I think they won 1 League Cup, which we haven't referenced until now. But they also made a couple of
2012 they won the League Cup, but they won the Scottish Cup 3 or 4 times. Yeah,
and they made a few finals in this period as well. And again, they just seemed to be the bridesmaid, unfortunately.
In 1960, they were runners up in the league, runners up in the League Cup, got beat by Bangor, and there was another cup where they were runners-up in. So the 4 times they were runners-up in 1 season in 4 different cups.
One thing we didn't reference, I find this incredible. David, I don't know if you know this, but when Kilmarnock beat Hearts on the 24th of April 1965, there was the Scottish Cup final was being played at exactly the same time between Celtic and Dunfermline. Can you imagine that happening today? It's just incredible that you got these 2 major football matches in different competitions happening at the same time.
Absolutely. I mean, I just couldn't believe that they would do that then.
I know.
that was football. And I think the cup final was televised live. I'm not sure if it was. I'm sure it was live because the Kilmarnock game certainly wasn't live.
Yes, the Kilmarnock game was on the radio, but it was bits of it because they kept going to the cup final. It was crazy. Crazy. It's beyond madness. It really is.
And because it's not just, we're going to see who wins the title or who wins the Scottish Cup. In narrative terms, this is the greatest story that you could, if you were a TV producer or if you're a script writer, this is what you would do. You would set it up so that the 2 teams have to play each other, and it's kind of perfectly set up for it. So, but you won't put that on the telly.
No. Well, there was a film made, I don't know if you've heard of it, Shot at Glory, I think it was called. Kilmarnock, Ali McCoist.
Robert Duvall plays...
It's Robert Duvall, isn't it?
Yeah, plays the manager,
That was filmed at Kilmarnock.
Oh, really? Fantastic.
Filmed at Kilmarnock. And also, McCoist is a bit of a character, as you know. He's a lovely man. When my dad used to take my son and daughter over to Rugby Park to watch the training, McCoist always came up and he always knew their name and he always spoke to them. Such a lovely guy. But he had to take a penalty and he had to miss. And McCoist being McCoist, he missed. 11 times he took that penalty until he missed. He scored.
Fantastic. What a man. What a character.
So one thing I had sort of underestimated in all of this is that your dad actually, because he played for Preston, and in my mind, Preston were like Preston are these days, but he played for a good Preston, didn't he?
Yeah, the Lillywhites at Deepdale. He did, and he played in the English First Division, and he played against all the top teams down in England. But he always talks about Tom Finney. He always felt that Tom Finney was the greatest English player that ever played for England. But he said not only was the best player he ever played with, he was such a gentleman as well. But on the pitch, he could run like a deer, jump like a gazelle, had the heart of a lion, and he would get kicked up and down the pitch all day long. Got up, shook hands with his opponent, and ran on. No animosity, no cheating or anything like that. Let's get on with the game. Never booked, never sent off. But it took my dad 6 months to find out, what was his favourite foot. Because he would go down the right wing, dragging the ball with his left and cross with his right. And then he would go down the left wing, drag the ball with his right and cross with his left. He said, he was just such a two-footed player, unbelievable. But he says he was just such a nice man. He didn't drink, didn't smoke, and out of the team, he always bought the first round, drank lemonade, because that's just what he was drinking. But as you probably know, he was known as the Preston plumber. And his brother was an electrician in the plumbing and electrician business. And not long after my dad got signed by Preston, he was in the dressing room for training one day, and Finney was sitting next to him. And I said, what you and Rena, my mum, doing this afternoon? And my dad says, we're going to go and get a washing machine. There'll be one delivered tomorrow morning. Don't worry about it. You'll be there. My dad says, well, how am I going to pay for it? I said, just give me £1 a week. Don't worry about it, just when you can. And that's the type of guy he was. Unbelievable.
Fantastic.
And at his funeral, I mean, my dad and I were at his funeral. It was unbelievable. I mean, the eulogy that Tommy Docherty gave about Finney was absolutely brilliant, because Docherty played in the same team as Finney. Yeah. And he was talking about when it came to renew contracts, and Finney was in 14, 12 and 10, and Docherty was in 12, 10 and 8. And Docherty went into the chairman and said, how come Finney's in more money than me? And the chairman says, because he's a better player than you. And Docherty says, no, during the close season he isn't.
That's fantastic. Do you know, that is fascinating. I've never heard until today, David, players' wages being talked away the way you did it. And that sounds like that's perfectly normal. It's like when you say the 14, 12 and 10, first team, second team, summer salary. And I guess that's what it was. But I've never heard of players' salaries being spoken about in that particular way. I've never made that connection. That's fascinating.
Yeah, £5 a point. And remember, it was 2 points for a win and 1 point for a draw. So if you win, you almost doubled your wages.
Wow. Win bonus. Fantastic. Do you know
3 points for a win?
Yeah, wow.
What a day.
Another Jimmy Hill thing.
David, it's been absolutely fantastic having you. Thank you so much for coming on and bringing
Very welcome.
Brilliant
Thoroughly
stories
enjoyed
to life.
it, gentlemen. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you.
That is great to hear, David. I really appreciate that. It has been fantastic. I've just got lost in your stories, and as you can tell, I've just lost my way in terms of what I should be doing on this thing as well. So take that as a compliment, please.
I will do. If there's anything else you need, just give me a shout.
Certainly will.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think we need to find another Kilmarnock team to talk about. Or if there's any other teams you have a soft spot for, David.
Well, I can talk about a wee bit about Hurlford United. You've probably never heard of them.
No, I haven't. No.
They're a junior club just outside Kilmarnock, and my dad became manager then, and they were called the Invincibles. They won the league without losing a game.
Ah, excellent.
Yeah, they won the League Cup, and every game was played away from home.
Wow.
So that's when my dad was manager at Hurlford. So player manager, to be precise.
Fantastic.
Excellent. Okay, we will wrap it up there. Thank you, David. Thank you, Jamie. And we will see you again next time.